Recently, I watched an entire 2-hour interview with a former mega pastor who left the faith and now labels himself as an atheist, which he later says he prefers humanist, but it's still atheism in the end. The pastor's name is Tim Sledge. He tells his story in a book called Bye Bye Jesus. Bye, bye, bye. And he told his story in an interview on a channel called Harmonic Atheist. I can honestly say that even though his interview was presumably supposed to cause me and others to doubt my own faith, it had the opposite effect. I walked away with a deepened faith, and I say all that while being able to sympathize with some of his hang-ups. There was church hurt, racism, watching other people flounder, and all the rest. And we have a video, by the way, called Can Faith and Doubt Coexist? That talks about doubts which intermingle with our faith and what to do about it so you don't end up like Tim Sledge, right? But I'd love to do a response to the entire 2-hour interview, but in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on a couple of key elements. First of all, he increased my faith in Christianity because while he rejects it, he still assumes huge parts of it. To his credit, part of his story is the story of helping others in addiction recovery. He had suffered under his own father's alcoholism and got deeply involved in that world. But a part of his disillusion with the faith, according to him, was seeing people come to Christ and not recover just because of their conversion. Or he would see real progress when people did things he didn't associate with conversion of asking Jesus in their hearts. He'd watch groups be honest and transparent and begin to help one another, and that was the source of their recovery as opposed to asking Jesus to heal them. Listen to how he puts it.
This works better than praying to give your life to Jesus. I mean, all those things that I kept expecting conversion to do, and there were a long list of exceptions to the rule of faith that I haven't mentioned by this time. But all those things that I expected conversion, and I need to say this, because I get challenged on this on Twitter all the time. I understood about discipleship. And I think one of the reasons I majored in pastoral care is I wanted to help people. I was looking for ways to make this work. So, and I was big on discipleship. You got to make disciples. You can't just expect them to walk down the aisle. You got to train them. Jesus said, make disciples, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you.
Now what he says is what worked was the openness and honesty, not discipleship as he understood it. Now this overlooks a very important point. Alcoholics Anonymous itself was founded with tons of inspiration from a Christian discipleship group called the Oxford Group. They took principles they saw in Scripture and pointed it to the challenge of addiction. Reading the 12 steps is like reading a Christian discipleship manual. Now, I hadn't read them in a while, but when I went back to reread them for this video, I went from planning to read just a few to reading all of them because they make the point far more than I thought. Listen to this. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him.
One eternity later.
Number 12, having a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. But think about this. According to Tim Sledge, this stuff works better than Jesus in your heart. Now, these are the very things that the New Testament clearly tells everyone to do when they invite Jesus into their heart. And then he talks about how everyone in the group was helping one another, which is the basic New Testament definition of what the local church is supposed to be. It's followers of Jesus who express his love to one another by doing the 59 one another's and each other's listed by the apostles. AA didn't just pull their ideas out of the ether, and they obviously didn't come up with them out of an atheist worldview. And incidentally, studies have shown that AA-type programs are the most effective at overcoming addiction. Now, if we were in a truly atheistic society with no Bible to reference from and no Jesus to look to, would we come up with anything resembling the 12 steps, especially since they are so saturated in Christian thought? In the West, we're just that. We're so saturated in Christian thinking, we take all of the good things it offers for granted and act like it would be there automatically. You don't have to believe the Christian message, but intellectual integrity demands you give credit where credit is due. And whether he likes it or not, Tim Sledge, while he would say he wasted much of his life being a Christian, he inherited much of his passion for honesty, transparency, compassion, confession, forgiveness from the very worldview he now rejects. Now that leads me to the second idea that increased my faith after listening to Tim Sledge's doubts, what I would call the claim that naturalism has simple and easy answers.
I'd read some expert's explanation, but if I wasn't careful, in 6 months passed, I'd already forgotten it. And the reason I'd forgotten it was because it was circuitous. It was mental gymnastics. So it wasn't easy to remember. One of the things I've noticed about the community of non-believers is that I'll think of something like, it's kind of a concept, and then I read somebody like you, I hear you say it, or I read somebody else say it, and somebody else, it's like we're thinking the same things because they're basic and simple and true.
Okay, to be fair, I don't know what subjects he's referring to inside the unbelieving community, but I have a hard time believing that answers to the truly difficult questions are basic and simple and true, and all unbelievers just agree on this. If they do, they're not thinking very clearly. Remember, the most essential difference between the two worldviews, Christianity and naturalism, is the Christian worldview believes that mind produced matter. The naturalist believes that matter produced mind. Now, when you carry these ideas out logically, you run into interesting problems. Now, my first example is the concept of equal human rights, which is something Tim Sledge obviously believes in. How do you get that without assuming a Judeo-Christian ethic? How do you arrive at being consistent with evolution as an undirected process which is interested in one simple thing, and that's reproductive survival? Next, how do you answer what Charles Darwin called his horrid doubt? He says this: "With me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of a man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind, if there are any convictions at all in such a mind?" Now, do unbelievers all give the same simple, easy answer to that question? Or how about the transcendent or non-transcendent necessity of moral standards? Are the answers easy, simple, and true? Color me skeptical. That's especially when you introduce another problem, the problem of free will versus determinism. See, this isn't just a Calvinism versus Arminianism issue. This is an issue among atheists. Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and other prominent atheists reject the notion of free will, but also hold to personal responsibility and ethics. How is that answered simply or easy in a way that doesn't feel contradictory? This gets to something I see happen over and over again as people deconstruct their faith and leave it. And what happens is a problem is detected within the Christian worldview, and it's automatically assumed the problem equals a positive case for naturalism. That shouldn't be. Naturalism, when taken to its logical conclusions, introduces a whole host of problems we don't apply critical thinking to. And I wonder if doubters and deconstructionists apply the same kind of critical thinking to their newfound atheism. I have my doubts. Hey everybody, if you don't mind, hit like and subscribe because it helps us to do more evaluations of these kinds of things and provide you with more content. See you next time.